Hey everybody, this is Brandon and I'm the editor for The Staunch. I was just hopping in here at the beginning of the video to let you know that I lost the audio files for the beginning of this video. So the audio is somewhat poor to start with, but it does get better. So I hope you stick around and listen to it and give it a chance. Thank you.
Okay, welcome to episode 3 of The Staunch. Myself, Jacob Stevens, here with my co-host Ross Wade.
Hello.
And our special guest today is Indiana State Senator Mark Messmer. So thank you, Mark, for
Good morning. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so before we get started, huge thank you for Mark for being here today. As I don't know if people understand this or realize this, but state senators and state representatives also have full-time
Regular jobs.
Right.
The jobs that actually pay the bills.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a time crunch for them to do anything, especially when it comes to campaign season. So big appreciation for you being here today. Ross, anything to opening to say?
Well, you said the words time crunch, and Mark's familiar with time crunches because he's in the contracting business, so that's all too normal.
Yeah.
Busy?
A normal, busy week with a lot of things that have to get done today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody's yelling at you.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just start with this. We'll get to know Mark a little bit more for those that do not know. So, Mark, let's start off with the counties you represent.
Okay. Yep. Mike. Yep. After redistricting, so this coming election year, and then after, this moving forward, it'll be all of Gibson County, all of Pike, all of Du Bois, all of Crawford, Perry, and Spencer. I used to have half of 4 counties and all of 2 counties. Now I have, still 6 counties, but the entire county, which is a heck of a lot easier to navigate when you've got a full county. You know who covers what. And so I was very appreciative of that change.
Yeah. Okay. And I keep tabs on Mark just to stay in the loop of things in the area, and I see Mark all the time at all these festivals and parades and stuff. So.
Got to do it.
Yeah, definitely hits all of them, which is appreciation. Okay, let's say wife and kids.
Mm-hmm. I've been married to Kim for 37 years, and we've got 4 kids, 8 ranging from 34 down to 26, 2 boys, 2 girls, and then we have 5 grandchildren, ages 7, 1 that's 7, 2 that are 3, and 2 that are about a year and a half, and 1 more on the way.
So that's really fun.
Grandkids are great.
Yeah. I've got a 2.5-year-old myself, and 1 on the way, and Ross has got 3 now. So
3, yep.
so they're fun. Okay, let's do. What do I want to say here?
I'd say we just jump straight into the bill we were just talking about before we got on air.
Well, one of the questions you said you might want to ask is, why I got into politics.
Yeah.
And it really all centered around I ran for state rep in 2008. That was my first political venture of my life. And the common question is, wherever I go, why did you decide to get into politics? Well, the gentleman that was a state rep before me in 2005, 2006, there was 2 issues really happened all in that same time frame. One was the funding mechanism for I-69, and for those of us in Southern Indiana, and the former state representative knew if there was no I-69, the Crane Naval Surface Warfare Center was told by the Defense Department that they would be closed. With no interstate, your mission is going to be distributed to the other Naval Surface Warfare Centers across the country. He knew that, but he still voted against the governor's funding mechanism to get it built immediately with no additional public debt.
This is under Mitch Daniels.
Under Mitch Daniels, and he knew it, and he knew he was putting our district in jeopardy, but he voted that way anyway. Just pure politics. And then at the same time, in 2005, there was a vote to put the state on daylight savings time, and the 51st vote was Troy Woodruff from Vincennes, He didn't, he didn't want to vote yes, but they left the voting machines open, I think, about 15 minutes, and he hit the final yes vote to push it over. And Crooks decided to make, that issue hot, and kept it very hot for that 2-year period by getting commissioners and all of the border counties to the current Central Time Zone. Got a bunch of them to flip, caused a bunch of political turmoil across the district. Said he was going to try to put the state on Central Time, statewide, and ran commercials against the governor, against Troy, just on that one issue, knowing that would, be the issue that would get Troy beat, because he had committed, to not support that in his campaign in 2004. And the day after the election in 2006, Crooks announced that he was no longer going to pursue the state on Central Time, because his voters didn't really care about that issue. And I thought, I don't know. I mean, and I kept seeing him show up in our county. When we had the time zone hearings, I thought, why is he there? Why is he there? Well, he had one goal, and that was to get Troy beat, and he did. And then he dropped the issue completely. And I thought, anybody that's going to play that kind of politics, I said, I don't know what it's going to take to run against him, but I'm going to find out.
Right.
And so, early 2007, I started the process of looking into how to run, and your grandpa was one of my key supporters in that venture. And by September of 2007, he said he wasn't going to run for re-election. But I knew if I whittled away his Republican support in Daviess County that I would beat him easily, and he knew that. So won in 2008, and I've continued on ever since.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, we're talking about Dave Crooks, who lived in Washington, Indiana for years, now has since moved to a more Democratic area. Maybe they like him better over there, but actually Dave's a decent, likable guy, but
He is.
don't
And
agree with his politics.
Yeah.
So.
And the day he got out of politics, he was actually very, through his radio station, he was very, open to supporting me, and
Okay.
I really can't complain how he treated me.
So yeah, that's good.
So the two topics, daylight savings and the I-69 development through Crane, were helped. You helped catalyze. You were a catalyst for those getting done. And so if you wouldn't have been, they were going to delay the I-69 even further.
Without the major moves project or bill getting passed. Now it passed in 2006, but Crooks voted no, and that was the leasing of the toll road in northern Indiana for $4 billion. That gave us a 10-year NDOT construction budget. That we'd be able to fund those projects just from that lease of the toll road in northern Indiana. Had a 10-year construction plan which was going to fully fund I-69 without taking out any bonds, with no long-term debt. And he knew that, but he still voted no.
It's hard.
And he knew the critical nature of getting that highway built as quickly as possible.
Man, that is so key, because it's really hard to calculate the compounding economic effects of getting 69 done and connected to Indianapolis. So that is a great public service for that. Yeah, alone. Daylight savings, I don't have a whole lot to add to. But it affects all of us, right?
It does.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I go back and forth to Chicago all the time, and even Evansville. That's an hour difference. So
well, and Mitch Daniels had a legitimate point. We were a state as 90% of the state stayed on Eastern Standard Time year round, and I know a lot of people get irritated with having to change your clocks. I get that. That's irritation for everybody. But we had, I think, functionally 5 time zones in the state before that. You had we had the central daylight time in the Chicago and Evansville areas. You had probably 4. You had Eastern Standard Time that most of the state observed, and then you had areas around Louisville that observed Eastern Daylight Time. And I don't know if anybody was on Central Standard year round, but he said our state is a mess. He said, how do we attract companies? And people ask what time zone you're in. Well, where do you live in the state?
Right.
And his point was, at least if we're at daylight savings time, whether you're Eastern or Central, we are consistent with the rest of the country. Now you can argue, is daylight savings time, worthwhile to do as a whole? That's a whole other question. But I think Congress has talked about just putting the country on daylight savings time year round, or eliminating daylight savings time. I'm ambivalent on that, but I sure as heck, when we were on Central Time in Du Bois County for a year, being an hour behind 90% of the state really was a pain in the butt. That's county by county is how the U.S. Department of Transportation determines time zones. So we'll never be on one time zone in Indiana. You'll have some people that'll never move off Eastern if you border Cincinnati or Louisville, and you have people that'll never want to move off Central if they border Chicago. So we're never going to be one time zone. I don't think.
As we're talking about highways, so while we're doing that, Mid-State Corridor, how is that in relation to that situation? Or are they totally different?
They're really totally different. And in 2011, NDOT was supposed to do a bypass, taking 231 from the Ohio River Bridge to I-64. It's 4-lane. They built that. I think they wrapped that up around 2010, roughly. We got that open. And in 2011, they were supposed to start continuing that construction, through Du Bois County to the northern end of the county. And then they announced they were going to pull the money out of that to fund more construction of I-69, which that was the governor's decision. You could do that. So Mid-States Corridor is really nothing more than getting that continuation of 231 back on their agenda. There was a group of business owners that formed, I think they called it the I-67 Coalition initially, just guessing that would be, a highway number they'd put on it. They never did. But they changed the name to Mid-States Corridor about 5 years ago. Okay. And NDOT's got that project in what they call the Tier 1 evaluation now, and it's purely an NDOT function at this point. I worked with U.S. Senator Mike Braun when he was a state rep to come up with it was Senate Bill 128. And all that is strictly allows a funding mechanism for local government and business under a if you have a regional economic district, it allows them to help offset expenses for NDOT. Allows NDOT to get their money to go farther by having local buy-in on NDOT projects. So I've gotten some criticism that Regional Development Authority has some control over the project. They don't. NDOT and the Indiana Finance Authority control that construction process completely, just like they would never have supported that bill, and all the Senate Bill 128 does is allows local people to have skin in the game on NDOT construction projects. It could be done on a project that's strictly within a county. It could be extension roads to tie into an interstate, but it allows on infrastructure through an RDA to be co-funded with combination of local government and business can chip in. So NDOT loves the concept, and they're supporting the Mid-States Corridor because it's going to give them a blueprint on how to have local skin in the game on projects that they do going forward.
So by local skin in the game, you mean say Davies County, for instance, as an example, doesn't like the path, and the county council gets together and develops their own mechanism to where they think the path should go to better that, or
not really, because the RDA, the local, we can't tell NDOT what to do. NDOT controls that whole whatever the tier 1, tier 2. They control the path analysis. Anybody can put comments in while they're going through those tier 1, tier 2 studies. Anybody in the public, and I put my own comments in. I said, I supported the concept of the bypass around Jasper and Huntingburg because you've got a lot of heavy trucks that come right through downtown. Just like your bypass on 5150.
Right.
But my comment to them was, once we get out of Du Bois County going north, when you're in Martin County, to try to stay on that existing 231 footprint as much as possible. Yeah. Just so you don't have a new highway built 2,000 feet away from the current highway. I get that Martin County didn't really like losing more property, and the goal is to increase traffic flow and make it safer. And I said, add passing lanes, on the existing footprint to speed up traffic as you're going from Du Bois County to I-69, rather than construct a whole new, highway in Martin County.
And do you think they will lean that way?
That's right now. In their Tier 1 study, it looks like that's the path that they're going. Now they'll announce that probably. I don't know if it's going to be by the end of the year or the first quarter in 2023, but I mean that's NDOT's tentative schedule is if not by the fourth quarter of this year, by the first quarter of next year.
Okay.
And then it'll go to what they call a Tier 2 analysis, where they take that 2,000 foot wide, buffer zone that they map out and then get it down to about a 500 foot buffer zone, in that Tier 2 process. And then they I mean right now the Tier 1 doesn't say whether it's going to be a 4-lane, interstate level, or a 2-lane, Super 2, or that's not part of the Tier 1 analysis. It's basically narrowing down one route. And I think 2 of the routes would have ended up in Daviess County, which when we started in 2011, that was the path we expected that it would go, would just be to bypass Huntingburg and Jasper and connect I-69 over here. But a lot of people in the logistics business in Du Bois County didn't like the process of going 15 to 20 miles west, and then they said that the additional highway mileage would be prohibitive for them to run their trucks that way anyway. So that was why NDOT pulled back, I think, when they did that Tier 1 study and tried to get the most direct north-south route they could.
Okay.
Are there any exits that are being planned in between Jasper and Washington, or is it just going to be straight shot?
I'm sure there will be exits when you get to the 5150.
Right.
There would be connection.
But in between,
I don't think so.
Yeah. In land development, I'm just thinking ahead here about potential. But no, it shocks me here in 2011 how long these things take to get done.
You're kidding.
There's obvious reasons why this is advantageous for everybody as far as business and trade, but is there any other pro reasons why you backed up the mid-state corridor idea?
Ultimately the route, I was kind of ambivalent on the route. I mean, I can see the benefit of the increased connectivity and safer traffic flow.
Yeah.
If you've driven on 231, north and south, there's no shoulders hardly anywhere.
Right.
I mean, the passing. I mean, it's heavily traveled. It's a death trap in many places, and so getting a safer route, and some ability to add passing lanes to make it a quicker route. It would help, and really from the river. You start from Rockport. Getting them a better north-south route. It'll help economic development through that whole region. Spencer County, Du Bois County, Pike County. I think it'll ultimately, help Daviess County, and even if the folks from Washington would have to go east on 5150 to hit it, it would give them a better direct south route as well.
Yeah, because our route through there, we have to go through Otwell mostly, or Lagodi, and then.
And the feds built $1 billion 4-lane bridge across the Ohio River. I don't know, what's that, 20 years ago? And the biggest expense that you have, in that process of connecting, into Kentucky and going south, is that bridge, and that was already, that was done a long time ago.
I see an assortment of signs not supporting the Mid-States corridor. What are some of those common reasons why people are opposing it so much?
Just the potential for losing property.
That's what I figured.
And that's not unusual. And I don't blame anybody who could potentially be losing property to oppose it.
Yeah.
But when they started the process and they had 5 routes that really, it looked like it covered the entire county. When they did the first 5 preliminary routes, you had a lot of people potentially in a 10,000 foot wide, zone that they were looking at times 5. You ended up with a lot of people that thought, hey, it could be going right over my house. It could be going right over my house. I don't blame anybody for opposing that. It was really no different when I-69 got built through Daviess County.
Sure.
Pike and Daviess were in my house district, and people that were going to lose property, would definitely have reason to be upset if they. But I think most of them, at the end of the day, if they got treated fairly on their assessments from NDOT and got,
right.
And then we've really structured state law to require NDOT to actually pay more than the appraised value for property.
That was my next question. What type of accountability is there on the state's part?
The state really has a vested interest in not going to condemnation, because when that goes to court and they go through the condemnation process, I mean, ultimately NDOT will win, but it'll cost them more to push something through, the actual eminent domain process and court proceedings than to just settle. And typically they settle 10 to 15% over appraisal on about everybody.
That's good info.
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned that homeowners, landowners can actually, it's still open right now because it's in the evaluation stage, and they can send in their comments and concerns.
Yep.
Who, where, how do they do that?
NDOT, has there's a mid-states corridor link that you can type in, mid-states corridor, NDOT. I mean, you just do a pretty simple Google search and it'll take you right to the comment section. They may have cut off comments probably at the end of July for the tier 1, but as they get into tier 2, I mean, it'll continue to still be open for comment.
There's also on the other side, there's I don't want to say anti, but there's a No Mid-State Corridor Facebook page that is pretty responsive and has info for you as well.
They would probably have direct link on that page to the comment section. I put my own comments in because when they were going to do the initial bypass, there was property owners that were on that path in 2009, 10, 11, who had homes on the initial bypass route that wanted to sell but couldn't because it was on the original bypass. And I mean, I directed folks to NDOT, to help get properties that NDOT's already bought properties on the original bypass route. And my comment to them was, hey, you've got a potential crossover, at some of these road, crossovers, and you bought this property in 2008, 9, 10, because I was familiar with the people who needed to sell it. I said, make sure you land, in that same path because you've already paid for right of way, in a lot of those places. And my comments were let's disrupt as few homes as possible, obviously, and if you've already bought properties on the old bypass route, let's stick to that as much as possible.
So I know some people that their agricultural land is affected pretty heavily. I know you and Senator Braun are big supporters on the Republican side, which is good to show the Democrats that we actually do care about the environment too. So how do you manage that side of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately, and one of the biggest property owners in Davies County that lost a lot of property was the Boyds. I mean, but ultimately they knew at the end of the day, I mean, their main concern was if you're going to take my property, treat me fairly. And at the end of the day, they supported the project. They obviously that 69 cuts right through, and any property owner, and the laws that govern, if you have property that gets split, how they handle the segment on the wrong side of the highway. I mean, we've got all those rules and laws stacked in the favor of the property owner. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if the highway's going to create, economic benefit for a region, and there's justifiable reasons to build, new highways, but you want to make sure that people that are losing property absolutely get treated, as fair as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think the folks here that lost property, they just wanted to be compensated justly. And,
right.
and I went to bat for several of them. I mean, over the time of I-69 construction, intervened, on behalf of as many people as I could, to make sure they got treated, by the bureaucracy as fair as possible.
Yeah, that goes back to my point in the previous two episodes. Is what you say to your state senator or state representative matters. So, if you have an issue, get in touch with them. They could probably have a lot more detail than the general public has, just because they know where to go and they may be in on behind the scenes conversations as well. So just want to make that point that it's important to.
Yeah, we can help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is this not an obvious point, but and it may not be, but what type of land value increases do you see typically from a highway that gets put in? So some of these adjoining landowners may lose a little bit, but the value of the property is going to go up.
Anybody that's got property by a potential interchange, their value of their property goes up exponentially.
Yeah.
What might have been a $10,000 an acre, crop ground is now a 200,000. Yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars an acre for. So they're going to lose. Some of those people will lose some property, but if they're in an area adjoining an interchange, it's going to go up dramatically.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you for that. We're going to jump into SB1, which is the I'll call it the pro-life or the abortion bill that was passed. Special summer session. So we had episode 1. We had Shane Lindauer on here who came at you with a pro-life opinion, and we all enjoyed that conversation. And he comes from the state house perspective, where I think you'll probably hear Mark go more into the detail of what the bill actually says, what the guts of it are, and how that kind of works behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. So when the governor set the calendar for special session, his only expectation was that we would pass some kind of taxpayer relief, because of inflation. That was his. We had a budget surplus. He wanted to try to get some money back to the taxpayer. He wanted special session to be that. But when he calls special session, it doesn't limit the legislature from doing anything they want, within that special session window. And so Senator Bray made it his personal goal, to get some type of abortion bill done during special session. And we talked about it before, in late June, early July. He and I and some other Senate leadership team members. And I said, Rob, there's no way possible to get a bill this complex, probably one of the most complex issues we'll ever try to tackle. I said, you can't get that done and done right in 2 weeks. It's just not possible. And we didn't, and I'll go into the details of that. And I said, the timing is wrong, 3 months before an election, and then what he ended up with, his idea of an abortion bill, he crafted it talking only to a group of pro-abortion OBGYNs. He did not consult Right to Life at any level, at any time, before session or during session, on how to improve the bill. And I told him before session, because of the content of what he was going to put in the bill and the timing of the bill, that I was going to be in opposition. And I said, do you want me to resign as majority leader because I'm a no? And he said, absolutely not. I need you to have you as part of the team. I need you in your position. We need to hold the caucus together. And I said, and he said, and no one will be expected to vote yes on the bill. He said, and he said that before session. He said, I don't care if it even passes. I need to get it as a personal commitment to a third reading, in the Senate. And if it passes or not, I don't care. Even 2 days before the bill went up for final vote in the Senate, he reiterated that again. And it passed the first week. It passed out of the Senate with 26 votes. I was a no, as I told him would be. And then the following week, and in the early July, when he asked for our calendars, he said, when can you be there? When can you not be there? And I had a out-of-town business meeting on July 10th. I said, I can't be there the 10th, and I can't be there the first week of August. And he waited to start session until we could have started on July 18th, but our chief of staff was on a vacation in Argentina, so he chose to hold off another week to start, which then pushed us into August. And I said, do I need to cancel my trip? He said, no, as long as we've got a quorum of Republicans there, don't worry about it. So we had 3 people gone that second week, and he said, no problem with that. Well, then, a week after session, that all changed. My no vote then, cost me my majority leader position, but I had offered to resign ahead of time, and if I would have known he was going to, fire me from that position, I would have stepped back before session, just on principle. But that's okay. And but when the bill left the Senate, it was already a pretty weak pro-life bill, but at least we had, for the rape and incest exemption, there was at least an affidavit required. We had some enforcement provisions in place for prosecutors who choose to ignore the law. But it was still a pretty weak, it really wasn't even pro-life at that point. The exemptions were still big enough to drive a semi through that. And the pro-life community hated the bill. There was nobody from any of the pro-life organizations that supported the bill, even the first half of the session. And then when it went to the House, what minimal protections there were in the bill were removed. And in 2011, I was the co-author of the House bill.
Oh, so are you saying the affidavit was removed for the rape and incest?
Yes.
So there's
no affidavit. The doctor can't question anything about it. I mean, they probably have to ask, check a box. But they're even prohibited from, asking for any validation of it. No affidavit. The provisions that allow the Attorney General to pursue cases in counties where the prosecutors refused to were removed. And the worst part about it, what was a pretty strict life of the mother exemption in 2011, I was the co-author of when the 21 week when a baby is considered viable. I was the co-author of the bill that had a very strict life of the mother, or if a woman would incur an injury that created a lifelong permanent impairment. I mean, it's pretty tight, and that provision was never challenged in court from the day we passed it in 2011. That was taken out, and it was the life of the mother or the health of the mother. And the health of the mother can mean anything to anybody at their choosing.
It's pretty general.
Very weak, and was intentionally done that way. So there was no enforcement mechanisms left. The life of the mother exemption was changed to life and health, which it could be anything a doctor chooses to call a health condition. And so what we ended up with, instead of a minimally good pro-life bill, we ended up with really an abortion bill that moved us backward.
So, I mean, to me, that sounds like a pro-life shell and a pro-choice
yes,
gut. Right?
Exactly. Now,
it looks like something's getting done.
But it was intentionally done that way.
Yeah.
So very disappointing, and I feel especially bad for people that were pressured. And there was a lot of pressure, put on caucus members to push that through. That, obviously, I lost my leadership position, and I can guarantee people were pressured into losing their chairmanship or feared losing their chairmanship if they didn't support the bill.
Where is this coming from? I mean, even on the conservative side, we're seeing obviously a lot of conflict between this issue, but is it just fear of anti-choice traps, or just the overall the public of Indiana, the general mass of Indiana disagrees with pro-choice? I think the last statistic I heard, which, I mean, statistics or whatever, but it's like 78% of Indiana civilians disagree with.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
It's a very complicated issue when you dig down into the statistics. I mean, you've got about 10% of the population who clearly and aggressively want abortion up to the 9th month. I mean, they're the fringe. You have 10 to 15% of the population that says we don't want any exceptions. And that's a pretty rigid. But you have the other 80% that are somewhere in between. I want some type of restrictions. Even if you consider yourself pro-choice, other than that 10%, there's very few pro-choice who really believe past the first trimester it is acceptable. You have most of the pro-life people that will accept, a rape and incest exemption, because if it's a legitimately scrutinized exception, you're really dealing with just a fraction of percent of abortions. And I think I think the pro-life community as a whole would accept that if there was a legitimate standard to validate it.
Right.
And when you looked at the headline of the bill, I think that's what most people thought they were getting, was a rigorous, rape and incest exemption and life of the mother, and that's the way the headline went out. Yeah, but then when you dig into the details, you see it's just not there. Now, theoretically, if you pull those loopholes big enough to drive a semi through out over time, you could. I mean, the framework's there to have a tight pro-life law, but the reality is it's not there at all right now.
Well, considering that the framework's there, what do you think the outlook is on that? You think it's just going to rest the way it is for a while, or do you see an anticipation?
As Senator Toms, who voted against the bill as well, he said, "How fast do you think people are going to be, willing to run through that razor wire again? Because boy, whether you were for it or against it, that was one of the most brutal 2 weeks that anybody's been through." And there's always the hope, always possibility that that some of those things get tightened up. But man, oh man, it's going to be people are going to be very hesitant to jump through that again.
Well, other than just the fear of or avoiding the anti-choice trap or whatever they're calling it, I guess the question I have is, where do you think that agenda is coming from? Is it coming from a bigger level of government that's pushing that agenda, or do you really think it's just well done lobbying here locally?
I think the opposition to tightening up the restrictions, that's primarily from the people who benefit from the procedure, and there's a lot of money to be made by Planned Parenthood and abortion providers, and they're not in any hurry to give that up, and they're the real push behind that. I think government legislators, I think to a high degree would like to see something tighter, but and right now the public, like I said, we talked about the 10% on each end and that 80% in the middle. It's a very very fluid, very very vague. You're trying to, and the goal should be from the Right to Life community. And I've said this to Right to Life, and Right to Life leaders. And so we've had 50 years of ingrainment, of acceptance of abortion in our culture, and to flip the switch and think, and if the point from the, I think that a lot of people consider themselves, most people do consider themselves pro-life, with exceptions, or pro-choice with exceptions, and you really we've had 50 years of a one-sided argument. Now's the time when the pro-life community really needs to wake people up to understand the brutality of what's going on. When people have an abortion, that you're taking an innocent life, and we've got to try to push the culture. And it's not going to
swim upstream, so to speak. What one generation what one generation accepts, the next one embraces, and it's not just night and day. Like, no abortion to abortion. Yeah. What you're saying is this is a very pivotal a time to pivot for that large amount of Hoosiers that are still kind of not undecided, but trying to find a hybrid solution.
Right. I guess. If you looked at Roe Wade reversal as a win, it was a win. That issue should have never been taken away from the state's ability to regulate it. The Supreme Court, they didn't legalize, or they didn't do anything to move the needle on pro-life, pro-choice. They just said this is a state's issue,
right? Not
a federal, court issue. Yeah. But now's the time. Now the fight begins. Right. The fight didn't end, with Roe Wade reversal. The fight began. Yeah. And so now's the time to change the hearts and minds of people. And it's going to take, can we get there? I believe we can, because science is on our side.
Right.
There's clearly, that 1 week old, 1 day old, fertilized egg has all the DNA structure of where, of us as adults.
Right.
It's all there. The reality is there. The science is there. But but the public has been indoctrinated to accept, the right to abortion for so long. Now's the time to start, to really get to work.
Yeah, well, indoctrination, we've been desensitized,
Mm-hmm.
not on abortion, just everything else. We've got CRT creeping into schools. You have what I call the trans ideology. I kind of refer to it as the weakening of America, but we've been going through this desensitization for 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
a lot of it really started, if you're willing to accept killing the most innocent human being at the beginning of life, or euthanasia at the end if you're willing to accept that, and over time our culture has been willing to accept that, you really devalue the appreciation for human life at all levels.
right.
And we're seeing that, across the country, across the world, and when you look at, violence and taking of human life, whether it's mass shootings or whatever, I think that all stems, the root of that is if you're willing to kill the most innocent life, then life as a whole loses its value.
Yeah, well said. I love that point.
Well, and it's virtue signaling 100% from the pro-choice side, because pro-choice is freedom,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, conservatives are typically on the side of freedom right now, seems like.
Mm-hmm.
But which liberty is more important, the liberty of the life that is unaware, or the liberty of the one who made a choice and needs to bear the responsibility?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm also all in support of public access to contraception, because contraception is a different argument than abortion.
Yeah.
It's some sort of responsibility.
Yeah, abortion has become, just really your backup choice to contraception, and like I said, we've been fighting 50 years of cultural acceptance of that, and there's a big difference between contraceptives and abortion. Still a moral argument to be made, on the correctness or not of contraception, but that's really more of a personal, moral, religious argument than a public policy. If you want to reduce abortions, then let's make access to contraceptives easier.
Right, and we made this point on the first episode with Rep. Lindauer too, but pregnancy care centers are
Mm-hmm.
also a great asset in not culture, but a resource for our community.
Yeah, well, one thing good that they had, through this process was additional funding, for those, pregnancy resource centers.
Yes.
That is part of the process to support people who choose to, bring their baby to term, and support for the mom while she's pregnant, support for the newborn. So, all good things. There were some good silver linings out of that cloud that came out of all this.
Yeah. So taking that, we talk about desensitization and kind of the left agenda over the last 4 or 5 decades creeping in to where it is today, right? But what I've seen, and this is more of not really the state of Indiana, of course, but nationally from federal politics, they seem to be way better at marketing themselves than we do. And, my opinion is that's because they bring up the same 3 social issues for the last 50 years, and that's what everybody gets emotional. Especially in today's time, no one can separate the policies from the man, policies from the woman, right? They have to look to, I don't think that guy's a good person. You have no idea, right? Just like if someone, I'm going to get on a tangent here, so I'll stop myself, but it's like someone will say, Brad Pitt, man, he's a good guy. You have no idea if he's a good guy or not. You have no evidence whatsoever. Everything that you see from him is surface level. You have no idea if he's a real human being, right? So I stay away from that. And I've said this on 2 episodes, but the only person that I know is pure and will always have my back, and that I can talk about all day long and have no qualms about it is Jesus Christ. And so that's where my backbone comes from, and if you've listened to the show, you know that. So, I'll get to my question is, does the GOP have a marketing problem? So, in the state of Indiana, it doesn't, in the red states, that are, really red and not purple. You don't really have to market a ton. You do, but not a ton. But nationally, to put it bluntly, it just seems to just get our ass kicked in the media and in all these different forums that we have. How do we combat that, and do we actually have a problem?
Well, I think it's pretty clear at the national level. We have a leadership problem. We have a very fragmented, national party, national agenda. Really, I think the last time you could clearly state that the Republicans at the national level had a concise message to the voters of the country was probably 1994, when Newt Gingrich led the Republican Revolution. That year they had a clearly stated national agenda, clearly laid out to the American public, ran on it and implemented it. And you go and you take us to 2016 when we had the House and the Senate and the presidency, and there was more infighting in those 2 years. They really, they almost got nothing done. They had a good, they had their tax bill that they passed, which was a big, tax changes at the federal level for business tax, for income tax, personal income tax. Great bill, but outside of that, and then I think they passed the bill that eliminated the mandates, for Obamacare. But they could have done so much more, but they were so divided. The House, just fought continuously. But when the Democrats get majority, by golly, somehow they find a way to stick together and push through what's important to them. But it's a void in leadership, and whether you have Trump when he came in, and then you had the people that were part of the institutional, that they liked the, kind of the status quo. There's been such a fight at the national level to have a clearly defined leader that represents the party and can portray that and sell that to the public. Obviously, it didn't work out for the Republicans in 2020. Hopefully in 2022 we at least have some. And at a national level, I still think crime, the border and runaway inflation. I still think that message is gonna carry and work as a whole for the Republicans. That we don't just pray that we get control of at least the House and hopefully the House and Senate, and minimize the damage that that Biden can do over the next 2 years. But there's really you have the anti-Trumpers, you have the Trump supporters, and it's really kind of fractured any kind of clear, concise messaging, and they have an identity crisis at the national level.
Yeah, I agree. So that also, I voted for Trump in 2016, and I actually didn't think he was going to be our candidate from the Republican side, and that surprised me. But I was happy to support in 2016 and again in 2020. But to run again, I would vote for him if he's our candidate, right? Because there's no alternative. But it's like a failed experiment for me, right? I loved what he did. I think he woke people up. Like, he made them watch the TV and be like, wait, I need to start asking questions. So I love that. I love some of the policies he's put in place. But as far as, to me, it doesn't mean anything if you can't be an effective leader, right? And I'm not saying that the cards weren't against him, because they were. But you need someone that's more mild-mannered that can come in there and do the exact same thing, but communicate in a way you're like, okay, I want to go into, some future war for America. I want to go fight for my country. I want to, go to the Olympics and wear that flag around my back, right? I would do that anyways, but my point is that to be an effective leader, you have to bring that patriotism to the floor, and I feel like it was just so divisive. So,
well, divisive is the right word. conservatives, it's not that they're necessarily losing an advertising battle. It's just that after 245, almost 250 years of democracy, what tends to happen in a democracy has already happened, which is the majority of Americans are now, and I wouldn't say majority, but a much bigger amount of Americans have learned the system of democracy, which is vote for free stuff, and that group tends to get bigger over time, just because it always does. And so now you have a not necessarily a money issue, but you've got an economic incentive for most of Americans to support a side of the White House that is promoting more free stuff, or debt cancellation and things like that. So I think what I'm going to try to tie this in, what you were saying, Jake, is we need a leader who is an expert negotiator, which obviously Donald Trump is a great negotiator. He wrote a book on it, but it's all about trying to get the other side to have your way, and not be so blunt force, shove it down your throat. This is how it's going to be, because right now we're in a tyranny. This is no longer democracy. The United States, it's pretty clear that Joe Biden didn't get 77 or 80 million votes or whatever. And if that's the case, even if he were to get 49% of the votes, which I don't believe he did, that means that the majority of Americans did not vote for Joe Biden, but he is the president, which is sort of like a tyranny. So advertising, negotiation, we need a leader who is able to get people to reinvest in what is an American, not conservative democracy, but to look ahead and say, okay, here's the problems that we're facing. We're not going to, if you and I were looking to solve a problem, but all we do is look back and forth at each other and we're focused on the people and not the problem, we need to get somebody that's able to go, okay, let's shift our focus to the problems ahead. Let's deal with those first, and then we can deal with some of the conflict that we have between our two parties. And
I mean, the parties at the national level, I mean, the fracturing, Republican versus Democrat, I mean, it's such a caustic environment. They really don't even try to work together. And I loved, every policy Trump brought forward. I mean, he's probably one of the only presidents that I've known in my lifetime that said he was going to do, A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
And by gosh, he did it.
Yeah, he did.
Now, there's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of barnacles that went along with that. I mean, I'd almost take a mean tweet, now for what we've got today.
Amen.
But I mean, I don't, can't say that I liked his personality, but I loved his policy. And if we can find somebody that can bring that type of good, solid, conservative policy, but not have all the sideshows, Ron DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis.
I would agree.
That would be my number one choice right now.
Yeah.
Which is, so you mentioned that. It's funny. So I listen to all kind of political podcasts on both sides, just to stay sane, but also keep informed. And we hear a lot of conservatives actually on a national level say that, I think Trump wiped the floor with DeSantis, which I actually disagree, because everyone that I've talked to from a grassroots level, and I'm not in just Davies County, it's not an echo chamber, just everywhere nationally, would say the same thing, like, I would vote for Trump, but I really would like DeSantis to be our candidate.
Yeah. It'd be more like, I would call Trump having the vision, and DeSantis being the leader that actually puts it into place.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that Donald Trump will ever go away from the national scene, and I mean, he could bring value in a lot of ways. I mean,
yes.
he was a good good visionary leader, but he just had he picked too many fights that he didn't need to pick. And I mean,
but I will say one, from a foreign policy perspective, I think he had a great demeanor, that he was very well respected, and if you didn't, you were going to be made to respect him. We do not have that. We did not have that with Obama. I don't think we really had it with Bush.
No, I would agree.
Either. Maybe the first George Bush, but I'm not sure with W.
Yeah, and part of that just goes with Donald Trump's attitude in general towards any other country, which is actually standing up and having a backbone.
Well, I mean, you notice there's been no change to the foreign trade policy that Trump initiated and put into place when he was in office. None of that's been reversed.
Because they don't know what to do.
Well, I mean, because we were on the wrong side of every trade deal.
Yeah.
That we were with. I mean, China, European Union, Canada, Mexico. We were on the wrong side of every deal ever done for the last 30 years. And Trump, thank God, he fixed all of them. And should America be first in those trade deals? Yes. Yeah. We should be looking out for our best interest above and beyond anybody else. And I'm not surprised that the Biden administration hasn't made an attempt to change any of those, because everybody would have to agree we were on the wrong end of every deal that had been signed for decades before that.
Even NAFTA, right, which was looked at as a success under the Clinton administration, on the surface at least. And now I deal with it every day in my job. The USMCA has done so much, and more. I'm working more in the automotive sector, and there's a certain percentage of our vehicles, trucks, whatever, that have to be built in North America, and if you don't, you get heavy fines, heavy fines. So that's forced a lot of manufacturing to come back to the States, to Mexico, and so now we have like our own partnership that we can combat the EU, and which are drowning over there, right? China has the tariffs still. I mean, the only alternative you have really now is India, but that supply chain is not where it used to be. It'll probably come back. It's an up-and-coming nation, but it's given us an advantage again.
I would say, before we wrap things up here shortly, on a macroscopic level for the United States, wouldn't you say the most major problem that we're facing right now is the amount of money that's being printed? I mean, because we can sit here and talk about social change all we want, but social change may change things economically, but economic change is definitely going to change things socially. And Powell and the Federal Reserve seem to think that modern monetary policy is the way to go, which I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that, but it's basically we can just print as much money as we want, and except for this pesky thing called inflation, right? Well, and then the taxes drain that system out.
And inflation, the government, when they spend more than they've got, it only has two solutions: raise your taxes to a confiscatory point that chokes off, economic growth completely, or inflation. And these inflated dollars are the only way to pay back. When you've got more debt than you can possibly handle, the outcome of all of this overspending that we've done for, go back to Obama's years. The amount of debt we've accumulated in the last two presidencies is incredible, and the amount of debt that Biden threw on, just in 2 years. There's only one recourse, and that's really inflation, and it's done intentionally. Now they're going to say, well, we got to tame this inflation down, so they're going to end up raising interest rates enough to drive us into recession. It'll happen. It's not a question of if, it's just when, because you can't drive interest rates up and that much and then not have an economic downturn. We've had 2 quarters in a row of loss in GDP, so are we in a recession already? Technically, probably.
Yeah.
And there's no way to keep raising interest rates, and the Fed, claims they want to tame inflation, but the government doesn't want to tame inflation. And they want cheap dollars to pay back the debt that they can't fund otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, and it seems like the only fix is if every individual in America tries to pay their debts, and that may or may not even correct the overall value of the dollar dropping, but it doesn't look good. If you look at the trends or the patterns of former countries that started printing money at this scale, normally it was a stagflation period after the inflation, which is a nightmare, where there's no growth while also things are costing significant amounts more than they used to. So other than just every American trying to become as financially independent as possible, what changes does America need to make in general to combat this? Modern monetary policy is not economics; it's politics.
Right. Well, I mean, let's keep our fingers crossed that we can get Republican control, get fiscal responsibility. Start to cut back the massive overspending at the federal level.
Yes,
we have got to. The next administration, hopefully it's a Republican administration and Republican House and Senate, and bend the cost curve. Start to cut back on the overspending. And I think one of the questions we talked about, maybe chatting on, was Senate Bill 2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got an inflation problem due to the government pumping money into the economy at a runaway level at the federal level. And our position, my position from the Senate side going into this was, we've got extra tax revenue for the taxpayers of Indiana. We need to cut spending or reduce taxes, and our choice was to pay down debt. So we still have an unfunded pension liability, for state employees, retired teachers. And our goal from the Senate the last couple budget cycles, and really every year, we put about $1 billion a year of our budget into paying down that unfunded pension liability. And our goal going in was, if we got $1 billion extra, let's pay down more debt. Putting more money into the economy, even if it's at a small level, it's just as inflationary at the state level as it is at the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
But the House and the governor were so hell-bent on getting that political win, sending people a check, right before the election. Ultimately, we were either going to have to give, and we split the difference. We gave a smaller rebate to the taxpayer, but paid down more debt. We wanted it to be all debt reduction, and eventually get us to where that long-term liability, and once you get to 80% of your future obligations in the pension fund, you're considered fiscally sound, and we're not there yet, but we still probably have about $6 billion of unfunded liabilities, and our goal on the Senate side has been get that debt. It was $15 billion in unfunded debt when I started in the General Assembly.
Wow.
And every year we've pushed it down. Every year we've put more of our extra resources into that. And at the end of this current budget cycle, if there's any extras, half has to go into pension obligations, and half to a taxpayer refund that we had triggered at the end of the last budget cycle. But our focus should be debt reduction at the state level. If it's sound policy at the federal level, it's sound policy at the state level. And I think next week they're getting ready to transfer $2.5 billion of our extra reserves. They're gonna transfer that money into the pension system next week. So we're gonna see, hopefully, that $6 billion go down to $3.5 billion, and then each of the next few budget cycles continue to push that that pension obligation down to zero.
So my question to that is, once we get that paid down to where it is zero, do you think it's more of a benefit to have no state income tax than it is to just give me a refund? Because my argument is going to be,
I would rather cut the tax rates,
right.
And we've got a 10-year schedule. As long as the reserves keep up, we're gonna cut that income tax rate, continue to cut it down.
Okay.
And we don't want to do, I think it might have been in 2012, 13, Kansas did a big income tax cut. Well, then the next budget cycle, they were completely underwater and couldn't pay their bills. And the right policy is to cut the tax rates, but we want to make sure we do it in a fiscally doable manner. If you can't
keep the cash flow.
Yep. We're gonna get there over time. We currently do have one of the lowest income tax rates in the country. There's a few states that have zero. They get their money, from other mechanisms. A lot of states have property tax. A share of that goes to the state treasury. Currently, all property taxes stay local. I mean, every state has, you still have to pay your bills one way or another. But reducing income taxes is our long-term goal, and we will continue to reduce them over the next 10 years as long as the growth path continues. But sales tax is by far our number one income stream, and personal income taxes is number two. We need to do what we can to continue to push that down, and let economic growth, let the sales tax. And I don't think we don't want to increase the sales tax rate, but I mean currently, there's still continued growth, in the sales tax revenue base to the state, every month, every quarter.
Yeah, I mean our sales tax is reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean Tennessee has no state income tax now, but I think their sales tax is like 9.5% or more. So
everybody really, everybody uses about the same chunk of their state GDP to fund their government. You just how you choose to take it. If we raise it too much, then Illinois, Ohio, Michigan would have a big sales tax advantage, and then those border counties would see loss in sales to people crossing the border to buy their stuff. So
right.
All has to be done. You can't do it in a vacuum. You got to factor in the other tax rates in your joining states and be measured and disciplined in how you do it.
So you think we'll see that tax rate cut to zero under potential Governor Braun?
That's possible.
Yeah.
We can root for that.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, because it's not really like a widely reported thing unless you just go out and search for information. Senator Braun announced that he was going to run for governor, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yes.
He'll be running against Holcomb, which is fine.
Well, Holcomb's term limited, so he'll be done.
He can't run in 24?
No, he'll wrap up his second term and then he's out.
I thought he was appointed.
No. In 2016, he just a unique set of circumstances over about a 6-month period, got him on the ballot as governor with Pence, running as VP in 2016.
Okay, that's right.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So my mistake.
No, it's all right.
I'm excited for Braun to come back to Indiana, and I think just what we were talking about. He's also been spinning his wheels fiscally as a conservative. There, he's trying to do a number of things, and it doesn't go anywhere, right? Because he's at a disadvantage there. So, I've not asked him this question, but I'm sure one of the reasons he wanted to come back and run for governor is to further that agenda financially, that he could be, and he said this many times, where he could do more in the state of Indiana for the people for Hoosiers than he could up at the Washington D.C. So okay, that's a good segue into. We're just gonna have some fun rapid fire questions, but one serious one. So, would you ever consider running for Congress as a next step, or do you enjoy what you're doing now?
Well, if I had to base my decision on the current toxic environment in Washington D.C., I'll use the Braun comment. I can get a heck of a lot more done for the good of the people of Indiana here. I mean, I'll never say never to anything.
Right.
And if the opportunity is right, and I mean, I'll discern that, through some prayer, when that decision time comes. When I started this political process in 2008, I felt pretty confident that, the next step was going to be, Congress. But as divisive and toxic as the atmosphere is out there right now, I'm not sure it's in, that's the right next step. But when the opportunity comes up, whether it's 24, 26, open to anything.
Okay. And that's better to hear, because the United States is a republic more than it is a democracy. So
Correct.
we need to correct our homes, city, state, work outward. Yeah. So I like to hear that.
All right. One of the questions I wrote down while we were talking for people that don't really pay attention to politics that much. What does a Senate Majority Leader do?
Functionally, your job is to set the rules for decorum on the floor, to get folks to the floor, and then technically, that's the job is to conduct, the rules for, what's proper and what's improper when we're in session on the floor. And I mean, that's the in the rule book. I mean, that's what the majority leader does. The pro tem is really, they would be the majority leader, the president of the majority side, and the majority floor leader, just helps conduct business on the floor while we're on the floor. If the lieutenant governor's not there, and the pro tem, is not available, I mean, there's been a few times I've gotten up and conducted session, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So you're third in command if the lieutenant governor's not there, or the pro tem has to step out, or if he's presenting a bill, then there's been a few times that I got to conduct session, which was very exciting. Other than that, you're there as to to serve at the bequest of the pro tem and just assist him. I mean, I probably did spent more time refereeing fights between caucus members than anything else, and just in helping guide input from when people were affected by potential legislation, helping take input of that. I mean, that's not really an official rule, but helping our caucus members and guiding them on getting bills moved through, and taking input from real life individuals that are impacted by bills. Sometimes legislators don't do a good job of listening,
right?
And so sometimes I was that pair of ears that listened to the complaint or the constructive criticism, and then went to the author and helped help guide policy.
Okay, yeah. So very important role. All right, so more fun stuff. What book are you reading now, or what book would you recommend?
The one I'm reading right now is Confessions by Augustus.
Oh, so you're into philosophy, are you?
Yeah.
You just made him the happiest man.
Yeah,
in the world
we'd
there.
be friends. We can talk more about that later.
I listen to a podcast pretty regularly called Pints with Aquinas, and it's really, if Thomas Aquinas weighed in on policy of the day, what would he have to say? Whether it's political, religious. So I listened to that a lot, and Augustus was a person that Thomas Aquinas went to a lot for background and theology answers to the questions of the day when he was here.
Let's see. So, or do you have another question, Jacob? I had a question.
Yeah, but you can bounce them off.
So I was going to stage a single question for every guest, and I thought about this. Our show is about attitude, what it means to be an American. The staunch means to be loyal and committed to an attitude. And given the current problems and solutions that we need in America, what would be, like, if people know you coin a certain phrase a lot, or I guess the question would be, what phrase would describe that would describe a philosophy or an attitude that would be the best cure for American problems?
Just going back to our roots. I mean, our country was founded on the personal responsibility.
Yes.
And solving problems at the closest level to where people live, at all possible. I mean, decisions made by people at home are going to be a whole lot better solutions to the problems we're dealing with than some mandate shoved down from Washington D.C.
Yep.
I mean, we should be. We are a republic. We should have a republic that's based on, the rights of states, some as much control at the state level as possible, as much control at the local level as possible, because you get much better solutions to any problems our society faces when they're driven and responded to at the local level.
Yep. Personal responsibility starts at the heart, then the home, then the city.
Fix yourself, fix your family, fix your community. All of those things, and for anybody wants to get involved with anything, in politics, help fix your community. Help do what you can. Get involved in community service at any level. I mean, you help build up your community. There's tons of ways to volunteer. There's tons of ways to get involved in making your community better, making your home better, making your church better. All of those things that's how you build and make a better state and a better country.
Amen.
Can't agree more.
Amen. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite movie?
Or you can give 2 or 3 if you need to.
I'm kind of a Star Wars series junkie.
Yeah, yeah.
Some good philosophy behind Star Wars.
Yeah, love Star Wars. Have you do you pay attention to the new series that come out, or are you just old style?
The old style. I mean, I might have watched probably one of the after the first 6. I think I've watched 1 or 2 of the new ones, but yeah, but the original, either the first 3 and then the 3 prequels. I mean, yeah, just love the storyline of all of those.
Yeah, you got to check out The Mandalorian if you haven't either. That's a very good series. So, favorite like either musician or like genre, whichever you want to go with it.
Probably my favorite musician, a guy who plays acoustic guitar called Tommy Emmanuel.
Tommy Emmanuel.
Easy to pull him up on YouTube. This guy can make one guitar sound like 4 people playing. I mean, it is. I love a good. Whether I don't care if it's guitar player, piano player. I'm a trumpet player. Love Chris Bodie, plays trumpet. I mean, I'd cast him as my my role model on how to play and what to play. But I mean, just I would say I would probably put Chris Bodie on trumpet and Tommy Emmanuel on guitar. To watch those guys play, I mean, I'm going to Chris Bodie concert at the end of November down in Nashville. Can't wait to see him again. Since post COVID, these guys are now out doing concerts again, and love all kind of genres of music, but those 2 would be my 2 personal favorites.
Okay, awesome. So last question. As a business owner and a leader in the Senate, like how can you be an effective leader? Like how does your day look like? How do you compartmentalize those 2, balance it, and still be effective? Makes sense.
When we're in session, January through either early March in a non-budget year or January through April. I mean, the reality is my brain really has to lock in on what we're doing in the General Assembly. I still go in on Fridays and Saturdays when we're not in session and try to keep up with things that are going on in the business. Fortunately, I have 2 brothers that I'm partners with that they keep the majority of the day-to-day operation handled on it when I'm gone.
Are you the oldest, youngest?
I'm the middle.
Middle?
Yep.
Oh, so you're the redhead in the group.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Those family dynamics work in every family just about the same.
Yeah.
And then, when we're done with session, I mean, it's really almost got to be like, within 24 hours, your brain's got to flip and go and get back into the, into the construction, service business mentality. And throughout the year, whether we're in session, out of session, I mean, there's always people every day, somebody calls, emails, needing help, with some type of bureaucratic hang up they've got with state government. So, intervening, throughout the year, trying to, fix problems for constituents, that never stops. And I mean, I've had some what I thought were very impossible requests, that have come from constituents, but surprises me, I mean, when you call whether it's a, state institution, I mean, and when they call with federal problems, I usually direct them to, Senator Braun or Congressman Bouchon's office, but, you really have to be able to pivot on a dime,
Yeah.
And the whole time I've got to make sure I balance the personal family needs of my wife.
Yeah.
Because if I come home on a Thursday afternoon and I don't detach from what's been, usually it's phone calls all the way home. When I get home, I better shut all that down. And when I don't, I get reminded pretty quickly. From my
wives are good at that.
Longtime bride, best friend of my life, she reminds me pretty quickly that hey, I'm here, and now it's time for her to get my attention. So always got to maintain, try to balance the 3: political life, family life, and work life, and it's difficult at times. I mean, this the demands and it's tougher to balance all that. You wouldn't think so, but when we're not in session. I mean, now is when we're in session, people at home kind of leave you alone. He's busy, he's in Annapolis. But when you're not in session, people want and need you, to be involved in things that are happening at the local level and try to get to as much as I can. outside of the job that actually pays the bills, but I got to make sure I'm there enough to support the business but still getting out in the community and helping fix problems and negotiate, people that aren't getting along at whatever the issue is. I mean, even at the local level, you still got to go in and be the negotiator many times.
Right.
And, the art of being good at getting legislation done is, taking an idea that I had or somebody, brought to me to request and being able to listen to, the opposition, listen to what they're saying and look at what you're trying to do and adapt what I've, get my goal done, but at the same time, if people that are opposed to what you're doing or have constructive ideas, I mean, I probably learn more from my opponents, on an issue of what I missed or things that I didn't foresee. But whether that's, that's it in business, that's it, when you're helping, you got to be a good listener, whether you're dealing with customers, whether you're dealing with constituents, or whether you're dealing with policy, and trying to work through issues in the House or Senate, as you're working bills through the process. The process, the personality, all those things really don't change no matter what you're doing in life.
Yeah, it's a skill. Active listening. They teach it at grade school level. It's important. Okay. Well, Mark, thank you again for joining. Thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.